school for journalism. With the idea of kind of covering sports journalism, I went to Syracuse. So that's what I wanted to do. I lucked into an internship at the Daily News under Leon Carter. He was a great sports editor there. Interned there, interned at ESPN, the magazine, then came back at the Daily News and just stuck with the high school stuff. And I mean, me and Dexter are like very parallel paths in terms of like climb. You know, it's like you always start with high school sports.
See,
go from high school to college,
and we've talked about
to pro.
We've talked about that on this podcast.
That's kind of how it's been.
Yeah, where that sort of used to be the progression, and now it's kind of like, yo, you just graduate and you just got to figure it out because there's not a design. Not that there was a design path, but there was an expectation that you would start at the high school level and then work your way up to the pros. Where now it's kind of like I'm already doing the pros, but in turn, I'm not getting compensated the way probably you guys were doing high school sports.
I'm not saying the way we were compensated was great.
I'm not saying that either.
But
however,
but what we will say, I don't want to speak for Ev on this, but we got the reps.
You know the situation.
Yeah,
you know what I mean.
But I'm just saying, for Eb and I, and I think even Ian said this when he was here too, was you got those reps. You got to be out there. You got to learn how to craft stories.
Kevin said this also.
Whether it was on the print side or I did both print and video, so it didn't really matter. You got the reps. You got to be out there. You got to learn how to cultivate your sources. You got to work with other great people and make good relationships, and those stuff that mattered. What do you think about? Because Brian always asks this. No, Brian's curious. So I know he's going to ask this question. Like, what do you think about that for the younger generation of journalists coming up right now in sports?
Yeah, because now it's mostly blogs. And like we were talking about before off air, a lot of aggregator sites that they want, instead of allowing you to do these stories that you probably, you're sourcing multiple people and, they're really thought out in longer pieces. They want you to just aggregate for X amount of days a week and get this stipend and then here.
Yeah, the business has overall gotten harder, and there's a lot like that progression. Like we were probably Dexter, me, Ian, that whole generation, if you will, of sports journalists was like kind of lucky in that there was kind of a progression in place. Even with that progression, though, I mean, it still boiled down to I went to J school, but it still boiled down to when you got out in the field, figure out how to do it,
Yeah.
And everybody kind of had to figure out how to, we were figuring out how to get stories, how to develop sources, how to do all that stuff, and we were doing it under the umbrella of the New York Daily News, or
Post when I was there.
Exactly, the Post. We were doing it under those umbrellas, and those umbrellas are increasingly not there because they're hiring fewer people. It's still the one thing I think it boils down to, and you said it a little, and this is kind of like as I kind of reflect on my career. Not that I'm old, okay, but as I reflect on my career, I think you said it just now. You have to figure it out, and it still boils down to whatever discipline it is. You have to kind of figure it out. It's kind of cool for you guys in that you can kind of chart your own path a little bit. Like when I was coming up, it's like when I was interning.
Yeah.
Okay, I wrote like a 2-page feature on Lance Stevenson that was like the sports editors loved. On the Sunday paper. Again, I was an intern. Apparently, that like as I understand it, that didn't happen very much at that time. But I was still locked into this progression. It was like you're still gonna do, even though I wrote a brilliant thing on Lance Stevenson, not to talk myself up too much, but I was still locked into this progression, I remember I was a fantasy football columnist. I think maybe like I was still doing GA stuff, had just gotten known high school stuff, and they were like, we need a fantasy football columnist. He's really good with numbers and fantasy. Let's make him the fantasy football columnist.
Right.
Okay?
Okay.
It's kind of like, it's a very low tier, if you will, column that I was writing. It wasn't exactly super high profile. It was a column. Okay, there were older journalists there who were very, very unhappy that it's like, why does he have a column and I don't?
Right.
So you
Really?
were locked in. Yeah.
That doesn't surprise. I know that.
Yeah,
doesn't
I said it, and then I was like, I shouldn't be surprised. At it.
Yeah.
It's funny, and I never knew that at the time, but I shouldn't be surprised at it. And for full disclosure, like I used to freelance and do video for the Daily News, so I also know people that Eb knows in there too. So
I still see some of that now because, like, for example, some people that you will call bloggers or whatever, just because they're not with like newspaper websites,
right?
We get on occasion some level of freedom that newspapers probably don't get because, and I know this because I also freelance for a newspaper, because you have a certain amount of space that you're limited to, whether it's 500 words, 750, 1,000, whatever it is. And then with a blog, you can incorporate tweets. You could use social media in that way. So yeah, there's also that element as well.
Yeah, go back to what you were saying. Yeah,
but my whole thing is like, so it was like, again, it was kind of like I was breaking the progression a little bit, so people were like not cool with it,
Yeah.
and so it was gonna always be limiting. And then even like when my last couple of years at the news, my last 2 years I was doing like social issues columns, and that was like a kind of
which I loved.
Yeah,
We always talked a lot about that. We loved that.
Yeah. But I was doing that, right? Mm-hmm. And there were people who were like, this is nonsense. You know what I mean? Because and again, it's because they felt I kind of skipped
some steps,
right?
Mm-hmm.
So you don't have to. Your generation doesn't have that built-in. Like the thing is, there are two ways to rise within the progression, right? It's either because, in my case, I'd like to think it was because I was good, so that's why I was kind of skipping steps, you know. Mm-hmm. But then there's also like you can be mediocre, okay, and because it's your turn, you're gonna be the Giants beat writer or the you know.
Well, we ain't trying to be mediocre here.
But now, like the way it works for you guys, it's kind of you don't have that built-in progression, but there are points where, and it's still challenging. It's incredibly challenging, especially because the pay has come down a lot.
Yeah, which is crazy because everything else goes up all the time. Like we have inflation, but we have deflation within journalism.
Yes,
it's awful. But the one thing is like let's say you break, if you can, there are more avenues now, even though it's tricky because people are going to steal your stuff, you know, or you know what I mean, you're going to break news and somebody, you know.
Oh, that's already happened.
People not giving you credit.
That's already happened to
me. But you do have, there are more potential, because you can put content out by yourself, right? There are more potential avenues for you, and it's hard still, so I'm not deflating that at all. But if you break like Jason Kidd got fired, you know, and you break Jason Kidd got fired and the Nets hired this person, and the Nets are, if you're on top of that for like 6 months, like somebody at like ESPN or something is gonna see, you know, and so like you have to hustle more, and there's a lot less reward in the initial, but there's potential, like there's like you can make a name for yourself without needing one of these brands now because you have these avenues.
Right, and the progression in those avenues sort of led us starting this. You know what I mean? Like it sort of brought us here doing the podcast. Now we're in our 63rd episode because it's another avenue. Yeah. So that's really what it is just trying to get those other avenues. And
I think Ebenzenr brilliantly pointed out what is the difference in journalism 10, 12 years ago to now, and why, although it's hard, there still are good opportunities for people to do things. And you don't need the umbrella of a company.
You don't, and you know, I do everything. Literally, like I was at an NBA game yesterday. Tonight I'll be at a fight for boxing,
which is good.
Tomorrow,
and I encourage him to do that.
You know what I mean? Like I do literally pretty much everything.
You have to.
I've even done rugby.
Like look at and not to go too far, not to veer too far, I guess. But look at Sean King. You know, Sean King is a guy who he went he was kind of doing his own. I don't want to minimize it, but doing like his own thing as opposed to like under the umbrella of somebody. And the Daily News saw that. You know, this was going back like 4 or 5 years, right? The Daily News saw that. Okay, saw like its value. Okay, and gave the man like a high profile like column position. You know, so that's what I mean. You can like build your own thing, and it's harder. The cool thing is you're building like. When me and Dexter are coming up, like Dexter was building the Post brand when he was doing videos, okay? I was building kind of my brand, but more, especially because I was a team guy too, I was building the Daily News brand, you know? You're building Bryan Fonseca's brand through and through, you know? And wherever you go, like if you land at ESPN or Sports Illustrated or the New York Times, right? They're bringing on Bryan Fonseca's brand, and you're continuing to build your brand, and they're just legitimizing it and paying you more money. You know,
there you go.
Yeah,
and
that makes sense.
And that's what you want. I feel like even in the places you get, we kind of get to where Eb is right now. You still are always building your brand. At least I still look at it like that way. Whether he's at Men's Health and me at AccuWeather, I'm still always looking for ways that you can still build your brand.
Yeah, and you also have your own company independently,
and still do that. Try to build my brand so we can have stuff like this.
Yeah.